We aren't saying a prayer. Eat.
I hate you.
That's fine.
You let Mom die.
Morgan. I am not wasting one more minute of my life on prayer. Not one more minute. Understood? Now we are going to enjoy this meal. No one can stop us from enjoying this meal, so enjoy it! Stop crying!
Graham,
Don't yell at her.
All right. Since you're all not gonna eat, I'm gonna try some of everything.
no matter what happens, we are all in this together. Natas, Vals, Asmut, even Refi is slowly dropping in the usage rate. No one is safe from the huge meta shift. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is affected by this. So let's all go through this together. Hey, what is up guys? Guitarok here, welcome back to another Brave 9 video. Alright, so in the previous video that I did talking about how Seto is so dominant with 99 freaking percent currently in the meta happening in Korea right now. So let's dive into all the other categories as well. So we're going to look at the defenders, supporters, magicians. So I would highly suggest you guys to check out that video that I did if you guys have not looked at it yet, so that you understand the correlation right here, what's happening to all the other categories as well. Alright, so first things first, obviously we're going to have a look at the defenders. So this is where the definitive standard comes in of all the taunters, all the broken units that we used to have coming up at first place. Alright, so obviously I think this is meant to happen, and I'm guessing most players were expecting this somewhat as well. So we have Lucius at a freaking 99.4% usage rate. Now, Lucius is still a very solid unit, alright? So here's why Lucius is so high, and this is just my theory. So number one, he's still good even at +0, alright? There's no denying it. You don't really need to skill him up all the way. Yes, obviously he gets much more stronger at +12 and then +15, and he's gonna be annoying to deal with. And that's gonna come really handy, not just in places like Arena, but even in Guild Wars. If you don't have a multi-hit unit, sometimes that Lucius can mess up your perfect win and reduce your chances of getting the perfect win to normal win, right? At +0, you can look down on the Lucius easily and you can just ignore him, but at +10 and above, he's not a unit that you can just look down upon, alright? So he does have a significant boost in terms of his offensive power. If you have a Lucius equipped with double rage runes, he's gonna be able to deal pretty significant amount of damage, alright? So I'm talking about towards units like Valtor, alright, which relies solely on HP. Obviously, he's not going to do much against 100% defense units, but if you're talking about tanks, he can still do a decent amount of damage. So he's not just there to tank, he can still dish out decent damage at +12 onwards, +10 onwards in fact. So 99.4%, I would say I do agree at his usage rate right here. So now, does this mean that almost every account in Korea server has Lucius? Except for that 0.6%? So here's the thing, right? Ideally, my advice has always been, if you are new to the game, I think I did mention this back then in the Cowley versus Glacier entire scenario right there for Jumpstart Quest. I would say pick Cowley, do not pick Glacier, because whatever diamonds that you have, okay, whatever diamonds that you have that you're going to use to build that Glacier up to +14, 15, alright, with the soul gear and all the companions, if you use stuff like your diamonds, I would rather you use those diamonds to try to gamble for Lucius. Alright, so it's going to be game changing, especially if you are new to the game. Having Lucius is just so significant. Even if you get a Lucius at +0, he's just fine as it is. You don't need to invest in him. He doesn't need like good runes or anything else. His presence in the game is just so dominant, like this 99.4% speaks for itself. So to all the players out there who do not have Lucius yet, my advice for you is this. Okay, so simple. If you don't have Lucius yet, what you want to do, try to save up as much diamonds as you can. During the rework, when the Octo comes, 28th of May, you go in with everything you got. Legend Scrolls, diamonds, make sure Lucius is selected as the one of the selected Octo, and then the companion you can just build whoever you want. Alright, if you are looking for Seto companion, then just go for him. But ideally, select Lucius. Alright, if you don't have Lucius, I wouldn't even recommend going for the others. Alright, so the 4 selectable units are Lucius, Livia, Vals, and Asmod. So Asmod and Vals is just not worth building after all of this. So the only reliable ones are Lucius and Livia. Now Livia is a bit complicated. I'm not saying that she's bad, it's just that she still needs that skill level. She's not going to be good at +0 anymore. With how the meta is shifting, you want her to be at least +10 and above. So even +10 is still kind of bad. I would say +12 and above to make her really, really strong. So it's just incomparable, right, compared to something like Lucius where he's just a solid tank at +0. So go all in for Lucius. Unless you are all about waifu, then that's fine. Alright, you do you, but I'm trying to give advice to players who are trying to strive in the arena. Lucius is gonna be a big help. Okay, so next up we have Gran at 43%. Alright, so you can notice the significant drop right there for Gran. From 56 dropping to 48, dropping to 43%. Now that is pretty incredible. Gran is still one of the more solid units in terms of the 6 devils. That's not affected much by the Helga meta. So lots of other defenders, they are no longer usable as Gran is in the Helga meta. Alright, which translates into the Octo meta after. So the reason why is just because buff prohibition is so strong, it's so broken from Helga. Whenever Helga dies, explodes, buff prohibition goes everywhere, and all your defenders who gets buff prohibition, they will lose their ability to taunt. Now that is a huge deal for units like Glacier, Benshina, Cowley, anyone who has taunt, alright, and they relies solely on their taunt. Which is why Gran is still being used very often, alright. So Gran has a very unique skill that is only unique to her only, so which makes her probably immune to all of this buff prohibition BS thing for the rest of her life. Her debuff reflective counter, so it's a very broken skill for sure, and it's what makes her extremely unique still. Alright, so she cannot receive buff prohibition. She will always be reflecting that upon back to the enemies. So something that is only unique to Gran alone. Yes, you can always counter Gran with a Ventana now that Ventana exists, but in the upcoming meta with the Octos and everything, I don't see Ventana fitting in that much anymore, and I think most players will try to probably place their Gran moving last. I'm not entirely sure of how the situation is or will be like for most Gran players. For players who use Gran, for me, most likely I'm just gonna use her solely just to try to redirect Livia's attacks away. Like that's mostly just the strat right there, because there's no longer Natus in the meta, so Natus is going to drop down hard, so you don't really use Gran just to counter Natus anymore. You use Gran to actually taunt and redirect attacks away. So it's going to be a bit of a different role right there, and yeah, definitely excited to see how this is going to translate. Okay, so next up at number 3, we have none other than Glacier herself. Alright, so she's dropping really hard. Plus 15 Glacier, if you guys like just recently built her, just recently completed Glacier, man, I feel really bad for you, man. I feel really bad for you because she's not going to get much usage after all of this rework, after all the Octo metas come in. So 37%, drop to 13%, drop to 16%. I'm guessing buff prohibition really kills her. I mean, with the Ventana thing around, and she doesn't really counter anything anymore, right? She used to be solely used to counter Livia, but that's no longer a thing because now she dies to Livia as a main target. Yes, you can use her if Livia doesn't hit her as a main target, she can still live, but then you have to use 2 taunters in your team, right? And in that way, in a lot of situations, it's going to be harder to utilize. I think most players just don't want to deal with those kind of BS, so they just probably just replace her. And I feel like in most cases, you don't really need Glacier anymore because Seto and Lucius can pretty much tank everything. If you have here's the thing, if you have Lucius, right, what you can do is you can place Lucius on one lane, you can place Seto on the other lane. So that's pretty much secured in terms of most of your tank needs. Alright, and then if you have Grand somewhat, that's gonna help you with Taunt. Like, there's just no role for Glacier to exist anymore. Like, sure, she can still do certain things, and I'm pretty sure she's gonna be still used pretty often in other places. Alright, Underground Arena, Guild Wars, etc. But just not much in Arena because it just doesn't make sense anymore because she's still gonna die to a lot of things. Seto is still going to be able to kill her most of the time with the DOT and stuff. So yeah, she's pretty much susceptible to lots of things. And with Beliaf around, if you have a high skilled Beliaf, most Glacier I noticed go for shield runes, and for good reason, right? Because Vital Rune is just kind of bad for Glacier. Shield runes will help her negate lots of damage. But I've noticed that most of the time Glacier really dies to Skeleton. Alright, even Chalkel, Zakan, she has low HP, base HP compared to a lot of other defenders like Gran, Benshina, Kaoli. She has very low HP compared to all of them. So survivability wise against the Beliaf meta or with skeletons in general, it's gonna be hard for her. Most of the time she's just gonna end up dying when she moves. Okay, so next up at number 4, we have none other than Benshina, 5.2%. Now, I do agree with Benshina's placing, and I can see that Benshina is still a very strong and solid unit. I mean, ideally, if you are initiating, if you are going first, attacking formation, you can benefit a lot from having a Benshina for sure. If you are defending, on the other hand, Helga is going to be a much better fit in that role. So Benshina, if you can kill one enemy, you will be able to activate the taunt immediately. But again, in the Helga meta, she's going to suffer a little bit, but not by much. I do think that her consistency is still going to be there. And in some occasions, she can still deal with certain things like Beliaf skeletons and dealing with Seto and things of whatnot. And yeah, I do agree with her placement. And I'm not entirely sure about this, but I have a feeling she might climb to be the 3rd place to replace Glacier, because it makes sense to use Benshina over Glacier in a lot of cases. I mean, obviously it's going to depend on formations to formations, and it's very formation dependent. But yeah, if used correctly, Benshina can still be a solid option to most players. Okay, and we come up to the 5th place at extremely low usage rate, 0.6%, which is Caleron. I mean, this is to be expected. Caleron, alright, so I've already done a video and I did say that she's not that good. Like, you actually have to pour in a lot of skill books to make her usable and strong, right? And she doesn't have the ability to taunt, and she's more of a tank that basically take burst damage. She's still going to have her uses, but in most cases, I'm not sure if it's worth building her. Like, depends on who we are talking about and who we are looking at. I mean, some players might have plenty of resources, and in therefore, building Caleron might actually be okay. But I would say for most free-to-play players, I would say just skip her and get Lucius instead. Again, mentioned already a lot of times, whatever diamonds that you're gonna use to build Caleron to plus 15, I would rather you use that 6,000 diamonds or whatever to pull for Lucius. I mean, yes, it's not a guaranteed for sure, but getting Lucius is just much more future-proof at this point. There's no reason for you to start building a Caleron right now, like, really. So yeah, just make sure that you are always aware of the meta. So if there's another role of a unit that is way better, there's just no reason for you to go for the other one. I mean, unless you are getting her just for Underground Arena or Guild Wars purposes. But in most other cases, Lucius just outclassed her by a mile, alright? It's just hard to recommend her right now. Alright, so moving on, let's talk about the magicians. Alright, so this is where it gets pretty interesting, at least for me. Now, why is this interesting? Alright, so a lot of old units are finally now back in the meta. Alright, so obviously, number 1, we have Livia. Okay, so Livia used to be about, if you look at your own meta in your regular arena, I'm pretty sure she's less than 50% usage rate. So to see her back into 96%, that is just incredible. So I'm not sure why, because in my opinion, I don't think she's a must-have, unlike Seto or Lucius, but still 96%. Maybe the Korea server, majority of the players just happen to have her locked away for a long time. So she's gonna be good in dealing with lots of units. So at plus 12, Livia has the ability to deal with special guard units. Alright, so we're talking about Glacia, we're talking about Lucius. Alright, so Lucius has double resurrection at plus 12, but Livia is able to just immediately remove that. To sum it up, basically means that Lucius has at plus 12, if I'm not mistaken, has 2 times 4. Alright, so basically 2 guards. Each guard has a times 4 times of Death Guard. Livia's ability can basically negate that entirely, that 4 Death Guard if she hits Lucius during the guard state. And yes, she can also deal with Glacia as well, which is very cool, very cool. Alright, so of course Seto as well. Alright, so Livia can one-shot a Seto on the main target. Now the key is on the main target, so there's still a workaround. Alright, there's still some way to try to work that around. So taunt is going to be still really helpful, but as you can see, not many taunters will still be relevant in the Helga meta. So therefore Gran is going to be one of the best counters to deal with Livia, to try to redirect attacks away. Alright, second place after Livia. Now I wasn't expecting this, to be honest. I was expecting Helga to be second, but to see Valtor climbing to 76%, I guess I could see why. Valtor is just really annoying, really hard to deal with. One of the most annoying tanks, even though he's a magician, but he's extremely tanky. He can reach 100,000s, 200,000s HP. Not many units can deal with Valtor late game. Alright, we're talking about when we go to round 2, 3 onwards. The few notable ones are Livia herself, of course. Angelica is one of the few. Seto is probably just gonna always be stuck at Valtor. I've seen Nartus double buff, triple buff even, cannot deal with Valtor at all. So which is why Nartus has dropped significantly so hard to the bottom of the ranks for magicians. So Valtor, definitely a full respect. I am still debating if I should be pulling Valtor's companions right now, because right now we are having this, what do you want to call this? Special offer in terms of the 10 plus 2. So I'm still actually thinking it through. Like, getting Valtor is actually not a bad offer, especially when he's kind of cheap now. Yeah, I would say if you're thinking about it, I would say just go for it, because Valtor is, I can see the future proofness right now. Definitely, he doesn't have to worry about a lot of things. Basically, he doesn't care about Helga because Valtor doesn't really need buffs. He doesn't care about Gran. Valtor can one-shot Gran, alright? Late game enough. If you move progress forward, Valtor can just deal enough damage to deal with Gran, and Valtor versus Lucius, versus Seto, versus a lot of other warriors. Even Adin usually cannot one-shot Valtor because Adin really need buffs and Valtor can just nullify that. It's just so hard for warriors to deal with Valtor, which is insane. Alright, so there are some basically niche units, maybe Frisia and stuff, but those are not that common. Alright, so the only common units that can deal with Valtor consistently is still going to be Angelica, whether you like it or not. And maybe some of you are not seeing it yet, but the cancer meta with Valtor is going to come later. Alright, so next up we have Helga herself. So she did climb to 67%, drop to 40 something, and then climb back up to 56%. Helga is going to be one of those units that's very unique, very niche. I feel like she's going to be stronger on defense. On offense, it's going to be harder to utilize her. Obviously, you're going to rely on the enemies to have strong initiation power, maybe triple, what do you call that? Triple range units, stuff like Christina, Lyudmila. So hopefully they will hit that Helga in range, and hopefully you'll be able to activate those buffs, and debuff prohibits the entire opponent. So that's the entire goal right there. So in most cases, I don't think Helga is entirely necessary after the Octo meta. I mean after the rework of all the units, because Lucius doesn't really benefit from Helga's buffs or debuffs. Seto doesn't really need those because Seto cannot be buffed or debuffed. Same goes for Livia. Beliaf is gonna be competing with Helga for this spot, for trying to... I mean, even though Helga is a magician, but she's still a supporter that gives buffs. I mean, she's more like Asmund being a supporter but still a damage dealer. She's kind of those unique units that's in a very niche role. So I kind of like it. I'm definitely going to build her. She's going to be good in a lot of situations, but in Arena, it's kind of unpredictable. But if she can get her buffs off, most of the time, you will be winning the battle. And it's just intense. And I'm gonna probably do a separate video talking about it. But I have a feeling in the future, there are going to be a lot of rework units that can counter with Helga. I mean, I just want to talk about that next time. But for now, let's move on to the next one on the list. And we have none other than Valfern. This is a new one for me and probably the most interesting one. 41.8% usage rate. That is pretty freaking high. Alright, so Valfern is at a decent spot, decent rank. Now here's the thing, Valfern is a much better counter to Christina Beliaf combo against Seto, because Valfern only needs Valfern. You only need him and you just need a couple of Graves, and that's about it. Valfern is going to be the best unit to consistently deal with Seto. You don't have to rely on the placements because Valfern have a decent amount of range. Now here's the thing, is it worth building Valfern? It's kind of hard to tell unless you have spare legend books, spare ancient coins, then go for it. But in most cases, I would say still go for Livia, Lucius, and Seto. Like only if you already have a strong Valfern at plus 10, or if you already have a decent skill up for him at plus 3. For me personally, mine is at plus 0. So in most cases, I don't think I'll be opting to use Valfern in regular arena. But maybe in underground arena or things like in Guild Wars, Valfern can still see some use. But outside of that, it's kind of hard to utilize Valfern correctly unless you have a decent skill level on him. So yeah, overall, in my opinion, I don't think you want to focus on building Valfern. Yes, he can be used to counter Seto, but so can a lot of other units like Valtor and stuff. So not sure if you really need Valfern. He's good to have, for sure. If you already have him, that is. If you're going to recruit him with 1,500 ancient coins and then build him from the scratch, I'm not so sure about that though. You might be better off, you know, using that resources for Seto, Lucius, or Livia. Unless you already have those units maxed out, then sure, go for it. Alright, so next up we have Nartus at 24%. 24%, man. 24%. How this king of mages has fallen so hard. Remember the day everybody was like, pick Nartus from Jumpstart. He's such a strong unit. And now he's like down there. I mean, it's not just about him, but everyone, right? The 6 devils in general just completely drop in the usage rate. I mean, this is kind of a sign that we have seen coming. But still, to see him drop so hard just because of a couple of units is really sad. Now, does this mean that nobody will use Nartus anymore? Not really, but his role just gets probably reduced a ton. He's probably going to die most of the time. So what makes Nartus really strong is not his ability to do the range. I mean, the range is pretty cool. One whole line. Why is it not cool, right? Ignoton, pretty cool. But what I think makes Nartus really strong is his ability to basically do constant damage every round compared to all of the other mages, right? So compared to all the other mages that needs to charge up, Nartus can just do that at plus 12. But in this patch onwards, once the Octo comes, Nartus will not, he's probably going to die within round 2, alright? Seto is out there. Whether you like it or not, Seto is everywhere. Seto will be able to deal with Nartus easily. Nartus cannot do anything to Seto, alright? You only take a small chunk of HP away. Same goes for Beliaf. Beliaf is everywhere, and yeah, these 2 units, whether you like it or not, every single player is going to get them, either Seto or Beliaf. So Skeletons still counter Nartus, best counter still. And a lot of other units actually. Valtor, I've seen Valtor at higher stages after charging up after several rounds. Nartus failed to kill Valtor. It's going to be a thing that's going to happen. And with Valfern climbing up, it's kind of hard to use Nartus because Valfern is going to be everywhere. Nartus is pretty squishy, so he's most likely going to die in a couple of hits as well. And even Livia, right? I've seen Nartus fail to kill Livia with a Refi and Michaela's buff. I'm talking about Livia plus 15. So that shows that Livia is just... I mean, Livia is really tanky, man. She's just so tanky at plus 15. You really need Seto to deal with her. Like, I don't think there's much units that can deal with Livia plus 15 with 2 vital runes. So yeah, it's going to be really annoying to deal with Livia, and Nartus just cannot help you right there. Even against Valtor, And we have much better options now. We have things like Frisha as well, that probably has much more output damage than Natus could have. Yes, Natus is still cool to be able to go through that 100% defense or whatever, but if you think about it, Seto, kind of replaces Natus in a lot of ways, offensively and defensively. So there's just no point to have Natus anymore. He's still gonna be solid in a lot of game modes, alright? Like I mentioned a lot in tournaments, if you have Natus, most of the time, if you are going first, if you know how to utilize Natus accordingly, you have a high chance of winning. So same goes for Guild Wars, right? Because Taunt Ignore is always really strong in that game mode. So having Natus is still gonna be a lot of flexibility actually compared to a lot of other units, but I'm not sure if you want to pick Natus right now and build him. He's just not worth it anymore. If any of you are still working on your Natus, I would suggest you drop him right now. Like just stop working on him. Don't build him anymore. Alright, if you have a Natus at +8, just stop right there. Don't pour any more skill level. Don't even pull for his companion. Alright, like seriously, I have been always considering and thinking of building Natus myself, but I'm just not going to do it after this patch. It's just not worth it. Usage is getting diminished and a lot of better units just came out, so just no point in going for him anymore. Okay, so next up, slightly below Natus, just slightly, we have Frisha. Alright, you can see Frisha climbing slightly from 2.8% to 12 to 16%. Now Frisha is going to be consistent. She will be able to deal with lots of units. Now why is that? As long as there's Graves, if you think about it, Frisha is going to be pretty strong in the Helga meta. Because whether you like it or not, if everyone has Helga, you're going to get one free Grave most of the time. Alright, because Helga is squishy and meant to die and things or whatnot. And in a lot of cases, in a lot of situations, she counters lots of units. Frisha can deal with a lot of units. That's not 100% defense. Alright? She will be able to one-shot Valtor easily. I've seen that being done before. She can deal with Seto and still revive from her own Death Guard, which is very broken. She can deal with Natus. She will not die consistently all the time. And yeah, her survivability skills is just pretty good. Although it's not gonna be consistent most of the time, you will still have that chance of her surviving most of the time. Alright, so she's a very unique one, and I'm guessing not many players see the value in having Frisha. Even in the recent patch, she came out alongside with Yuri, right? And it's always the problem when they introduce two units and most players just look at the warrior. Most of the time, they don't really care about the magician or defender or whatever that comes out alongside with that strong warrior. Which is why she's not having that much of an attention to her. But I'm actually glad to see her climbing a little bit throughout in the weeks. So hopefully in weeks to come, she will reach that 20 to 30% usage rate and probably be on par with Valfen. Okay, so and the last one at 7th rank, the one notably worth looking at, is none other than Katarine. This is extremely interesting. A Katarine at 10.4% usage rate. Now 10.4 usage rate is pretty common. I mean, it's not extremely common, but still that's like 1 out of 10 battles, right? You will see a Katarine somewhere. And that's kind of interesting because Lucius is there, Seto is there, right? Beliaf is there. So Katarine is gonna be able to clear out plenty of skeletons. Katarine can deal with Seto if she has Beliaf's buff. Now, most of the time, Beliaf to Christina is going to be a thing, but I do think that Beliaf and Katarine is going to be much more consistent because you are able to deal more. Alright, the area is bigger, and also you might be able to hit Lucius in that range as well. So I do appreciate it. I actually am very happy because I'm a big Katarine fan. I didn't build mine back then when she was first introduced, and with now that she's sort of like slightly back in the meta, I hope that she climbs more, and that will inspire most people to build her. Even me myself, definitely, if I have the spare resources, I am either eyeing her or Frisha or Valtor. I know it's kind of hard, right? For mages, Valtor is a must for me. Like, I'm definitely going to build Valtor for sure. But between Frisha and Katarine, like, I'm still debating which one should I go for. They both are very unique, alright? They will have their uses for sure. And I'm actually glad to see Katarine being in 10% usage rate. Even though that's not extremely high, but maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe she might be able to compete with Natus on that 20% usage rate scenario. Okay, so lastly, here we are, the epitome of these supporters, and everything is changing right here. I know, lots of players have been telling me, oh my god, Refitia? Why is Refitia dropping so hard? Is it worth to build Refitia Guitar Rock? Is it worth? This is something that I get asked a lot. Plenty of players have asked me this. And it's kind of hard to predict Refitia's future. Alright? I'm gonna be honest with you guys. It's really hard to look at Refitia's future. And this is just solely my opinion. Yes, she's dropping really hard. From 95% to 77 to 71%. Okay, so the reason why she's dropping is not because she's bad. Okay, so it doesn't mean that she's bad now. It's just that in a lot of cases, in a lot of scenario, there's no reason in using Refitia anymore, because lots of things that you see doesn't benefit from her reflective counter. So you are just using her mostly from her buffs. But then if you have units that doesn't require much buffs or cannot be buffed like Seto, right? It just doesn't make sense to use Refitia anymore. Like if you have a team consists of, let's say, Seto, and then you have Angelica, and then you have Lucius, Gran, Valfern, Frisha. Like a lot of those meta units now doesn't really. I'm not saying that Refitia's buffs will be useless on them. It's just more that they are not as buff dependent as a lot of other warriors that we have seen before. Refitia still needs to be there to make lots of units more usable than they are. Alright, so things like, I'm not sure if we are going to see it still, because even recently I've posted lots of add-in getting frozen or getting charmed and things of whatnot, but will that still be a thing after the update? I'm not entirely sure. But to have that purification, to be able to remove those negative side effects of things, is definitely still going to be helpful, especially if you are still using add-in. Alright, add-in is super susceptible to all this stun, freeze, charm. Alright, granted that Dalvi might not be that often seen anymore, which is fine. Glacia maybe still seen once in a while, but Lyudmila will still be there. So stun add-in is still going to be a thing. So I'm not sure. It's going to depend on a lot of things. But in most cases, I can see Helga being a contender to replace Refitia, because Helga's buffs is going to be much stronger, and she also gives debuffs as well. So it's going to be a big help for most units to be able to benefit from that. So basically, Refitia's reflective counter just doesn't give much value anymore. There's going to be a lot of ways to counter that, and obviously there are still lots of places, lots of stages that you can benefit from Refitia outside of PvP, right? If you do play Guild Wars or Underground, Evil Castle, or Evil Castle in general, some campaign stages, harder ones, and even in the World Boss and things or whatnot, Refitia is really, really solid almost everywhere. So I would say just build Refitia up to plus 12 if you are new. Alright, so I think that's going to be the much better or solid option. But should you go for her first? That's the question now. Lots of players do not have Refitia. And do you still go for Refi? I would say yes, because most of the time, if you have Refitia, it gives you lots of flexibility. And if you are asking whether or not you want to build Refitia, chances are you are still pretty new to the game or you are in the lower ranks. And Refitia can still be pretty solid right there. Obviously, you're not going to see Helga, Valtor everywhere. Alright? So Refitia is still going to be an okay choice. She's not like a must-have like she used to be. I feel like Seto is a new must-have. For Refitia's case, it's more like she's a nice-to-have, and she will make your life easier kind of unit. So in my opinion, she fits that niche. Okay, so next up we have Beliaf at second place. I mean, this is to be expected, I guess. 32% usage rate. She does have companion. She's now has bonus range at plus 12. She's pretty usable for sure. The only thing that I do not like about her is that her range is not as huge as I thought she would be, but I guess it's not such a big deal, I guess. It's not the end of the world. Still gonna be really solid in a lot of players' formation. She's much more of a Guild Wars and Underground Arena kind of unit compared to PvP. I do think that in PvP, yes, skeletons are cool and stuff, but in most cases, it's kind of inconsistent and it's not something that you can rely upon. The control might not be totally there. It's gonna depend a little bit on luck, and obviously the luck factor can be reduced the higher the skill level you go, because the skeletons is gonna last more, etc. But in most cases, I'm not sure if you want to go for Beliaf first. I mean, if you already have a Beliaf plus 10 somewhat in your inventory right now, then she's a solid choice to build and stuff. If you do not have her yet, right now, I don't think you want to pick her up and just build her from there. You can do that slowly. And she's still a strong unit at +3. I don't see it as she's a must-have to +12 compared to Seto and Livia. So definitely, if you're thinking of just recruiting Beliaf, leave it at +3. I do think that that's still going to be a usable case scenario in most standards. Okay, so next up we have Veronia at 18%. So this is going to be pretty interesting. Now, Veronia is still going to be pretty strong. Obviously, lots of things can still be paired with Veronia. Veronia to Alec, Veronia to Adin can still be a thing. It depends on what you want, right? So Veronia to Yuri as well. She gives debuff immunity. She gives the units the ability to deal a ton of damage. She has irremovable buffs. She gives them 100% defense. So can still be solid most of the time. And in some cases, if you have like 1 or 2 units that need buffs, using Veronia makes much more sense than using Refitia, because while Refitia does give a bigger, huge area, but if you only have like 1 or 2 units that need that strong buffs, Veronia's buff is gonna make much more sense, because she will be able to give much more power in terms of the buffs percentage and things of whatnot. Alright, so below Veronia, dropping way harder than I thought he would, is Albion. 2.4% usage rate. Now, I guess it's extremely upsetting to see Albion drop this hard, but I can understand with the Helga meta, he kind of struggles to strive anymore. And of course, Albion Grand is definitely a thing that most players complain about, and being extremely cancerous and things or whatnot. But I guess this will just be a meme now. It will always be a meme for us. Alright, once that time comes, oh, you survived the Floria Albion Grand meta? I've never experienced that. How does it feel? As veteran players, we can always tell new players our past experiences. No one is gonna know what happens back then. But definitely, if you have seen the craziness, the intensity of Floria Albion Grand, and you know how cancerous that is, I'm guessing the future players will not know what we're talking about right now, right? So they'll be just like, oh, I have no idea what's that. Is Albion even strong? Like, his 2% usage rate. Yeah, it's a story that we can tell the newer players in the future. For now, definitely Albion is no longer being used. He's still a must in Gorgona. Yep, if you want to recruit him to use for Gorgona, definitely still a beneficial supporter to have. But definitely no rush though. You can build him up slowly. You don't have to like waste your resources right now. So just save as much of your resources for the Octos as possible. And lastly, 5th place, Asmode, 1.8%. Now, that's extremely upsetting. I'm an Asmode user, so to see him drop down this hard is just kind of sad actually, kind of sad. I know with Helga meta, everybody will have 100% defense, so it's going to be harder to utilize Asmode. He's still always going to be a fun one to use in other game modes. In Guild Wars, I do use Asmode a lot, and I do appreciate his presence in my team. Helps me out to deal with lots of harder formations basically. And yeah, for arena wise, I can see like there's not much appeal for him anymore. He's just taking a space, wasting that spot. You're better off using another much more solid defender, or something like a strong magician like Valtor or Frisha, as opposed to one Asmode taking that spot, right? So in most cases, Asmode just doesn't do much anymore, so there's just no point for players to be using him. Okay, so that basically pretty much sums up the meta for all the supporters, defenders, and magicians in the current week of the Korea meta. Definitely, we are going to expect something like this for the rest of the servers in about, I would say, give it about 2 months. Then we're going to have the same thing happening to us as well. So once the Octos come, we will slowly see this shifting towards this direction. Now, the future is still unclear for a lot of things, alright? So things like Refitia, things like Angelica, and I know a lot of you guys have been asking me, should you build this, should you build that? And it's kind of hard to answer those questions just based on should you build this or should you build that. I need to look at, the rest of the units that you have, like what's the plan, the resources you have, the amount of diamonds you have, and whether or not you're going to go for Seto, Lucius, Beliaf, etc. But here's the best advice I can give all of you. If you don't have Seto, pick Seto, alright? Work on Seto, make him a +12 before you work on other units. And then, once you have Seto, then you can slowly look at other options. Lucius, Livia, and then Beliaf. Alright, so you want to focus on the other 3. Maybe Angelica alongside if you have spare resources. But I would say Seto is a must to plus 12. And then go for Lucius. Now here's the thing, if you are new and you already have Lucius plus 0, that's fine. Leave him at plus 0. But if you don't have Lucius at plus 0, you want a Refi tier, that's fine. Work on a Refi tier up to plus 12. Make sure to select Lucius as the selection as well, so that hopefully you get to pull Lucius alongside while you're working on your Refi tier's companion. I would say Refi tier, just get her up to plus 12. There's no point in going further based on what I'm seeing. Plus 15 is no longer necessary. Plus 12 is going to be good enough because you're going to be using Refi tier more overall for the buff range and purification. Alright, in most cases, you don't really need that strong buffs anymore. So yeah, obviously things are subjected to change. This is just based on what I'm seeing right now. If you have any additional questions, leave them in the comments below. And if you want to ask more questions, feel free to head over to the Discord. Links will be in the description below. As always, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a nice day. Goodbye.